Okay, we're going to talk about texturing assets with trim sheets. I'm going to show you a couple simple examples. Now, this object, if you see it, it's composed of two separate objects that I've unwrapped. The unwrap is how you would unwrap an object normally. So if I open the UV editor, everything is in the 1-to-1 UV space. So let's go here. You can see it's U, that's up 1, vertical 1. So I can scoot it to the 1, 2, 2, 2, just telling you the row up and down, left and right. I'm going to add this material to this. F4 to hide the lines. And you can see that it does a weird job. Now, I built this object based on the grid. And what I want to do is I want to see how this object, how the texture is going to look as it moves. I'm just going to press, let's put the unwrap UVW modifier on it, and I'm going to add another modifier. I'm going to hit X, and I'm going to hit array, and I want to make sure that it's the modifier, so I'm going to click it, and I'm going to hit F4 so I can see things, and I'm going to make sure that I have 1, 2, I at least need this so I can see how it would tile on both sides, and I can change the amount, but I want them to be where I can see the edges. I'm going to hit F4 to turn my lines off. I'm going to go to array or unwrap. I'm going to set this to just 3. I'm going to hit Alt-Q to isolate, go back to my unwrap, and to see, I'm just going to click See in Result so I can see the array. I'm going to go over here. I'm going to turn off the lines for the seams. I'm actually going to turn array up 1 more, so I've got an extra. Go back to my unwrap, See in Result. Now I'm going to start unwrapping this. Now I've cut in some lines like this one right here across the front. I'm just going to grab these, and if you hit F2, you should be able to see your selection better, which is instead of the red. I'm just going to open UV editor. I'm going to see my rocks, so I'm just going to go to base so I can see it here. I'm just going to grab everything. I'm just going to get it off of there. Hit F4 to hide that. I'm just going to click across like this. And I'm just going to say mapping, flatten mapping, because it's flat. I'm going to turn it this way. I've missed a tiny piece, mapping, flatten mapping. There we go. And now I want this top to be this trim texture. So I'm just going to go up. And it's hard to see here, but in the array, I can go between two of them, like this. And I can see how it's going to tile across, because it still works even off of it, because it is, if I click this button, this texture is tiled in every direction. Let me go back up to here. And trim sheets are where you can break a ton of rules. I'm just going to click this, and I'm just going to drag up to like that. I'm going to press G to hide my grid. I'm already in there, stuck with it. Now I see this gap here. I'm just going to push till it's not so obvious. And I'm using my stone texture. I like mine better than the one that I made in the last video. Now I'm going to go back over here, F4 to see my lines. I've cut another line through here because I'm thinking about the way that the trim sheet is segmented into these shapes, and so I'm making sure that these are in strips so I can easily select them. Now there's some hidden parts. If I click through here, grab these, and I zoom down, I notice that there's some sections that are missing. And since I can't see them, they're behind this, I can press F3 to see through the mesh, but I can still have some difficulty selecting things. That's why you want to unwrap things before you get to combining them, but I can always break it apart. Just hit mapping, flatten mapping, hit OK, rotate it 90 degrees. Let's just press F4 to turn that off. I'm just going to grab these little square sections. Look at how it's tiling. And I'm just going to put a brick between there. There is a break between these assets, but it'll make it seem like there isn't. In fact, that top piece is still bugging me, so I'm just going to grab all of it. Just push it together a little bit more. In fact, I could probably push it there. And now, I don't like how this is fusing. So I'm going to break the normal rule. I'm going to grab this object, and they're attached. I'm just going to say break. I'm going to scoot it over, and I'm just going to flip it. If I go here and click, I can flip this way, or I can flip horizontally. I'm going to do this. Flip it horizontally. I'm going to make these edges just overlap. Now I'm going to grab the whole thing, scoot it over, that feels a lot better. F4 to find spots. Grab this strip. Grab this one. Now these look pretty big, so I'm just going to grab this, 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 and this. Mapping, flat mapping, rotate, just scooting them over here. I'm going to grab this side, just because they're flat mapping will work. And I can't see what I'm doing here, why I make adjustments, but I can come over here, and by meeting these two up, even though they don't actually meet up, I can scoot it down, and I'm just gonna try to add that upper edge so it looks good. Now this seam going all the way down, I don't like it, so I'm gonna say, how high is that? It's 2 up. I don't like this seam here. I'm going to grab this, and I'm just going to say break. I'm going to shrink this. Let's make it larger. Put it down here. I'm just trying to get this top edge, and it's not flat here. I'm going to press 2. I'm going to select this and this side, and I'm just going to say flatten, just to make moving things, making them line up with these edges a little bit easier. Just trying to get that seam naturally right there. Now there's an error here. You can see it moving up. I'm just going to grab this flex it down a bit. This section here, press 3. I don't like how that looks. Just want to move the seam off of it. I'm not liking that either. Now, see this gray edge? I can go into Photoshop and I can push this even further to the edge to make sure that it tiles better. Just going to bring it here. And I'm going to do the same thing I did up here. I see this seam as I move. Well, I don't want that seam, so I'm just going to grab this, hit break. Let's just put a brick right in the middle of it. And I can see that here, now it looks like there's no separation between these two meshes. Now, for sections like these, the interior rung, just hit F4. I'm just going to go up. I'm going to stop right here. So I'm going to grab this side. And I've kind of beveled this edge. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab one on each side. And I can't flatten map that, so I'm just going to use Pelt, Start Pelt, change my Relax off of Optimize 3D, Start Pelt, hit OK. Now that's too large, hit F4 so I can see what I'm doing. I'm going to turn this sideways, hold Control as I'm shrinking it down, grab these big bricks, and you can see that I've got 3 here that are pretty easy to deal with. And I'm going to do the same thing with this arch. I'm going to flatten it out. So I'm just going to click F4. Because I can turn this entire round arch into a flat. I want to select this all the way up, but instead of clicking each one, I'm just going to hit Grow, and I'm just going to deselect these by holding Alt. Just to make sure. Pelt again. Now I can't get it quite right because of my angle snaps, so I'm just going to press A to turn that off. And now I want to make sure this is 100% straight so that it lines up. I'm going to press 2, I'm going to double click this one, and I'm going to say flatten. Just going to scoot it up a little bit. Grab this one, double click, flatten, and I'm going to try to keep the same distance from here to here. Flatten. And I can grab more of these edges. Just hit 3, grab this. Hit F4 so I can see what I'm doing. Go over here. And to make these rocks match, I'm just going to get them to be the same size. Now you can see this one's slightly off too, so I need to do that same flatten. And I'm going to try to make sure that edges line up with a natural seam so that it feels correct. Now for this side section, I'm going to do a very similar thing. I'm just going to click. I'm going to say grow. Just going to do it twice.
Incoming transmission.
Now I'm going to go up. Something like that. Hit F4. Now I'm going to say pelt, but pelt's not going to give me what I want. Because if I start relaxing this, what's going to happen is it's going to turn into this. And that I can't line up on this grid, because you see what it does. It straightens everything out. So I'm going to turn it this way. Turn off that. I'm just going to press 2. Double click, flatten. Double click, flatten, and I want the same distances. I know that these top sections and these bottom ones are very thin. And if you see that's too short, it's going to click it. Now these edges aren't straight, so I'm just going to double click them, align horizontally, it's worth it. Alright, I'm going to grab all these, and now I know that I had these sections down here with these squares, so I'm going to go back down here, find those same squares, shrink it down, just holding control to maintain proportions. I'm going to move this thing around, and you'll notice that the curved surface can't ever properly line up with this because there's less, on the inside track there's going to be less room, so I'm actually going to have to condense and move. And that's the idea behind being able to take a flat texture and make it curved. And I'm going to, once I mirror this, so I don't have to do the other side. I'll be able to copy this so that it doesn't have the seam kind of like this one. This is the basic idea behind making things like this. And I can make tons more assets, and they'll all share a similar feel because they're made in this same style. And once I get one of these done, just scoot the thing over, hit OK. I'm just going to turn off my array. Because I built this object on the grid, I can put it back on the center of the piece, I can export it, and I can take this into Unreal. And once I bring those textures into Unreal and this object, I'll be able to build with an object that gives me tons of reusability. And this is what the asset looks like in Unreal. And this is just a simple arch. There's a million ways you can use this. All right, hopefully that gives you the tools you need to start trying this type of work.